let's jump into the team that the Lions 2 years ago had all the predictions, right? Where they were like, they ended the season really strong last year. Maybe they're in the Super Bowl next year. I feel like that team this year is the Houston Texans. How far can they go is the question. But in order to predict how far they can go, we have to go into the past and see how far they went last year. So last year, the Texans finished 10-7. They got a wild card win over the Browns in the playoffs, 45-14, with Stroud throwing 3 TDs in that game. And then in the next divisional round, they get blown out themselves by the Ravens, 34-10. CJ Stroud having 19 of 33, 175 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 0 turnovers in that game. Just kind of got the doors blown off them. Last year, their defense was 14th in the total defense, 23rd against the pass, 6th against the run. Their offense, 12th in total offense, 7th passing, 22nd in rushing. Coming into now this season, they have the 22nd ranked O-line, which I've been with all these teams now. I'm going to start including the O-line rankings because I think that is a big piece to when teams are good and when teams are bad, especially when they have elite quarterbacks. It's just those elite quarterbacks, the elite running backs having time, right? Or having space to run through giant holes that open. I think you can look back at teams that have won Super Bowls or lost Super Bowls solely based on O-line play. So that's why I'm including them in this. So in their offseason, they brought over Danielle Hunter from the Vikings, who had 16 sacks last year. Coincidentally, they also have Will Anderson last year, who was the defensive rookie of the year on the defensive line. And last year, they actually set a franchise record when it came to sacks with 46. So obviously adding Danielle Hunter from the Vikings as a pass rusher this offseason to pair with Will Anderson, I really do feel like is going to bolster this defensive line. They also went, I mean, if you just look, and this is what I did, I looked at who they brought over in the offseason, and it's clear that they are trying to replicate the success that DeMeco Ryans had in the 49ers, the success that the Eagles have had over the past couple of years for both those teams, just by having depth at the D-line. So they brought over Danielle Hunter, obviously drafted Will Anderson last year, and then they brought over Edwards Jr., Barnett, and Autry on the D-line, and then Akuda, Henderson, Bryant, Johnson Jr., and King, all D-backs from free agency, various teams, obviously. And then not only that, drafted with their second round pick, because they obviously didn't have a first round pick, drafted in the second round, Kamari, I am not even going to attempt that last name, L from Georgia, the cornerback. And then also in the second round, brought over an offensive tackle from Notre Dame. So they shored up their offensive line in the draft and then, well, attempted to, right, with the second round pick. And then in the offseason, they went all defense. So now last year, as I just said, they were 14th in the league in total defense, but trying to shore up that defense by bringing in nothing but D-line and defensive backs. And then we talk about their coaching staff. Every single one of them is returning from what they did last year, which is what you love to see. What we saw happen with the Lions, right? Where everybody was like, we got something good here. We're not going anywhere. So they have DeMeco Ryans as their head coach, Matt Burke as their defensive coordinator, and Bobby Slowick as their offensive coordinator, all coming back for a second year. So when we look at, now that we got the run sheet of what the Houston Texans did this offseason, I do think they finished what? They finished last season. I just put my notes down and now I need them again. They finished last season 10-7, right? They're over and under. Again, it's paper crazy over here. They're over and under. Oh, I don't even have it. Egg on my face. But Casino and I both picked their over and under as I pull up what they're supposed to be this season, this upcoming season, I should say. And I just think, again, when you compare them to what the Lions did the previous year, this is everybody's hot pick for this year, right? And you know what? It should be. They brought back their entire coaching staff. They made just giant improvements, I would say, on a defense last year that was decent, right? 14th in total defense. So middle of the pack last year. Their over under is set at 9.5. So they're 10. Casino and I both said over because with every addition this team has made, with bringing in everybody that they have in the offseason, even if it's just for depth, right? I mean, you can look at Danielle Hunter as their big offseason signing, but I like the signing of Akuda, and I like how they just went all D line, all D backs, and then added just kept the units together that made this a 10-7 team last year, right? We saw, I think what most people thought, including myself, was just a shocking display by CJ Stroud, right? I thought he was going to be better than the Panthers quarterback than Bryce Young, but I didn't think he would be this good, especially that fast. I would have picked him just based on size alone because I didn't like it. But then you also look at who they brought in, which I left off this list because I wanted to talk about him individually. But you look at last year, 22nd in rushing. So who do they bring over? Joe Mixon, basically the vocal point of the Bengals rushing attack for the past 5-6 years, however long he was with the Bengals. But so you shore that up, and then you bring in Stephon Diggs, again, big name, a vocal point of an offense that you've already seen. So you saw Joe Mixon, a vocal point of the rushing attack in Cincinnati. Now you bring in Stephon Diggs, a vocal point of a very potent Bills passing attack when he was there. Stephon Diggs. Again, Josh Allen was not who we see Josh Allen as before Stephon Diggs got there, right? And you can say they grew together or Allen grew because of Stephon Diggs, but you bring him in as a clear number one wide receiver when last year it felt like the Texans last year had an elite quarterback, had trouble running the ball, and then had a bunch of second and third wide receivers kind of stepping up, right? So now this year, you bring in a clear number one running back, clear number one wide receiver, pair them with everything you had last year. Obviously, I really like the addition of Dalton Schultz last year that they got over from the Dallas Cowboys. So now you have CJ Stroud, you have Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, and then one of the best fullbacks right after Juszczyk from the 49ers. You have Andrew Beck, an offensive line that, again, has a bunch of first and second round picks on it. Kind of haven't performed up to those standards, but it's still, where did I have? Oh, yeah, 22nd in the league in offense or offensive line play, which is the thing I'm most concerned about, because if you can't protect Stroud, then maybe when you can't protect your quarterback, you see an Aaron Rodgers situation, you see an Anthony Richardson situation. Obviously, I hope that does not happen. The last thing I would want to see is CJ Stroud being hurt, right? Because he's one of the most exciting players in the league, and I want to see this Houston Texans team do well. But you look at all the pieces, and then their defense last year, a good defense. I don't want to say great because, again, they were middle of the road, but all they did was bolster that defense. All they did was add key pieces to their weaknesses in offense last year. How is this not an 11, 12, 13 win team? How is this not a team competing for the number one seed? Now, you always have to be scared of a sophomore slump with CJ Stroud, but again, we can't play the what if game with what if great player last year is not great this year, because there's no data to suggest he wouldn't be great this year. Right now, there's just the superstition of a sophomore slump and all that kind of stuff. We can debate that. We can play the what if game till the cows come home. So just looking at what they had and then looking at what they added to what they had, This is, again, the over under is 9.5. How are you not, if you're a big betting person, how are you not smashing the over button? This is, it feels like a lock for a team that especially is going to go over 9 wins, right? They need to win 10 wins, which they won last year, with arguably more question marks and a worse team than they have right now, right? Coaching staff, everybody stayed together. Everybody has another year under their belt, right? So this, we always see rookie quarterbacks struggle because the coach gets fired, and then it's a new offensive coordinator, and then it's a new um, system the next year. So 4 years into a rookie's career, they've played with 4 different strategies, schemes, playbooks, coaches. CJ Stroud is getting consistency, and much like everybody else on this offense, on this defense, consistency and improvements at key spots. Now the Texans didn't go all out in free agency, but they got very specific pieces to help with what they're trying to do. They needed a number 1 wide receiver, Stephon Diggs. They needed an actual rushing attack. You got Joe Mixon. They needed their D line to not only have depth, but to have one more piece that can get to the quarterback. Boom. Brought in a guy who had 16 sacks last season. So again, I love this Texans team. I think they are in contention to be the number 1 seed in the AFC, but we're just going to have to see if all these pieces not only click together like they did last year, but grow to the amazing season they had last year, right? I mean, a blowout win against the Browns, who had the number 1 defense most of the year last year, is incredible. So I am all in on the Houston Texans. Again, if you're a bettor, smash that over. But again, as we've learned from this podcast, never take gambling advice from me. So that is all I can say to you folks.